Good evening, I'm David Kramer with Alaska Weather. As always, please visit our website, weather.gov/Alaska. You can check out any updates to the forecast or any watches, warnings, or advisories that we might have out for your area. Also call our weather info line, 1-800-472-0391, getting updates to the forecast through that means. And you can email me at the address at the bottom of the screen, david.kramer@noaa.gov. Taking a look now, start off in southeast for the warning that we have out. It's a high wind warning that is in effect for the southern inner channels. Now this does include Ketchikan and Metlakatla, and we do have warning gusts up to 60 miles per hour through those inside waters. And that is going to be out until 10 p.m. on Saturday evening, so 10 p.m. this evening. Moving up to the north, we'll start up in the Dead Horse area. We do have a winter weather advisory out for snow and blowing snow, and this is in effect from 1 p.m. on Sunday until 6 a.m. on Monday. And a little bit to the east, blizzard warning in effect for Kaktovik and Barter Island. This is going to be in effect from 4 p.m. on Sunday and also out until 6 a.m. on Monday. Visibilities in that blizzard could drop down to a quarter mile or less at times. Then down in the interior portion of the state, we have a couple flood advisories, watches out. So we do have the flood advisory out for the Chena River near Freeman Road. And there is water that is being reported on the road, and that is going to be out until Monday night. And then we also have the flood watch, that is for the Salcha River, and that's specifically near the bridge where we have some ice jam flooding, and that's going to be through Monday afternoon. Again, for any questions on any of these, please visit our website, weather.gov/Alaska. Check out any specific advisories or warnings that you might have out for your area. For our breakup map, starting off in southwest Alaska, the Nushagak River has some open water, and then we do have at the Tanana River mostly open water. Otherwise, the majority of rivers are still mostly ice at this point. A few breaks here and there, but for the most part, still seeing a lot of ice cover. We'll keep you updated with any updates that we have and conditions that are along these rivers and any ice jam or otherwise flooding related incidents that we come across. For our satellite imagery, we have multiple lows moving through the system. We'll start off by the western Aleutian Islands, where we have a low spinning off just to the southwest of the islands, and that's bringing in some cloud cover to the area. We have another low near the eastern Aleutians that's moving slowly to the west and bringing in some precipitation and cloud cover to those areas. We have another low that is out south of Kodiak Island that's spinning mostly in place, but slight westerly movement. And then finally, we have another system that's out just south of the Alaska Panhandle that's moving in towards the Ketchikan area. And then if you can see, we have some cloud cover south of the Gulf of Alaska approaching our area, and the next system on its way up from the south. Taking a look now at the weather for the remainder of the day, let's stay out in southeast Alaska, where our low is bringing some rain to the majority of the Panhandle area. As we move further inland, we are expecting that to be a mix of rain and snow. Some isolated areas of snow in the Wrangell-St. Elias Mountains and in some of the mountains near the Copper River Basin, but the majority of mainland Alaska is going to be clear of precipitation for the remainder of the day. However, of note, along the Arctic coast, just to the west of the area, we do have that trough moving in. That's going to be the one that's going to bring the blowing snow conditions to areas along the eastern portion of the Arctic coastline, so we'll have to keep an eye on that one. All the way down by the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island area, the low just to the south is bringing some rain to the area. Low by the eastern Aleutians, bringing rain to the eastern Aleutians. Colder as we get further to the west, a mix of rain and snow expected for the eastern or central Aleutian Islands, and then snow out west. For tonight, things are going to warm up quite a bit. We're going to see some rain by the western Aleutians, rain for the central and eastern Aleutian Islands. Then our lows moving out into the Gulf of Alaska. Our second low is making up that 978 millibar low coming in from the North Pacific, bringing a lot of rain and tighter isobar packing that's going to bring some of those stronger winds into the southern portions of the Panhandle. It's also going to bring in some heavier rain to areas along the Panhandle, tapering off as we move further to the north in the Panhandle area. Mainland Alaska still not going to see a lot of precipitation, with the exception of the Arctic coastline, where our trough is moving through that Arctic coast area, bringing in some snow to that area. As we look into Sunday, that system is continuing to push to the east, bringing more snow to the Arctic coast and those blowing snow conditions as we move further along the Arctic coastline. The rest of mainland Alaska is not going to see a lot of precipitation, and then until we get down into the Panhandle area where our low out over the Gulf is bringing in some heavy rain and areas of higher winds to areas all throughout the Panhandle, with especially in those southern locations, tapering down as we get further to the north. Out over the Aleutians and Bering Sea, isolated rain showers with several weaker lows moving through the area. As we move into Monday, a new system coming in towards the western Aleutians from the North Pacific, bringing in more rain to the area, and some isolated rain showers for the rest of the Aleutian Islands. High pressure extending in over much of mainland, where we're keeping most areas pretty clear of precipitation. Again, the exception is up along the Arctic coastline, where a new frontal system is pushing and bringing more snow to the area. Another low in the Gulf of Alaska, bringing continued heavy rain to the southern areas of the Panhandle and continuing to bring lighter rain up in the northern portions. As we look at our low temperatures, we're staying southeast Alaska, dropping down into the lower 40s. Colder for Yakutat, down to 34 degrees there. Down into the lower 30s for much of south central Alaska. More interior locations dropping down a little bit more. Talkeetna at 25, Glen Allen down to 20 degrees. In the interior portions of the state, most locations getting down into the teens. A little bit warmer for Fairbanks and Fort Greely. And then as we move into western portions of the state, starting to get a little bit warmer there into the 20s. Up into northern portions of the interior, back into the teens and single digits, and along the Arctic coastline in the teens for the most part. Kaktovik a little bit colder, down to 7 degrees. Kotzebue Sound area in the mid-teens, in the low 20s for the Norton Sound area, with Gamble getting down to 18 degrees. In the 20s for the YK Delta area, down around freezing for the Bristol Bay area, and then the mid-30s for the Aleutian Islands. Sunday highs are going to get up to around 40 degrees for the Aleutians, mid-40s for the Alaska Peninsula, into the 50s for the Bristol Bay area, mid-40s for southern portions of the YK Delta, into the 30s for the northern locations, 30s around the Norton Sound as well, in the 20s for the Kotzebue Sound area, right around 20 degrees for western portions of the Arctic coastline, and staying in the teens for areas in the eastern portions. Down in the interior part of the state, northern locations in the 30s, southern locations getting up into the 40s, and in the 50s for much of south central Alaska, with Seward getting the warmest up to 56 degrees, and into the 50s for the Panhandle area. Dropping down for Monday morning, back down to around 40 degrees for the Panhandle, mid-30s for much of south central, into the 20s for the interior locations, into the teens to lower 20s for the interior, and then dropping down to -3 for Arctic Village, coldest in the state Monday morning. Into the teens for western locations of the Arctic coastline, single digits for the eastern locations, and the teens for the Kotzebue Sound area, and the teens for the Seward Peninsula as well. In the YK Delta area, dropping down into the lower to mid-20s, and right around freezing for the Bristol Bay area. And then in the mid-30s for the Aleutians. Monday afternoon, getting up to around 40 degrees for the Aleutians, in the 50s for Bristol Bay. In the 30s for the YK Delta area, 20s for much of the Seward Peninsula, Kotzebue Sound area, teens along much of the Arctic coastline, into the 40s for the interior, into the 50s for South Central, and right around 50 for the Panhandle.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
For our aviation, starting off with flying weather on Sunday morning, widespread IFR conditions over much of the Bering Sea and Aleutian Islands. The one exception is out by the western Aleutian Islands, where we are seeing some VFR conditions. VFR conditions expected for much of the southern portions of the mainland, but as we push into the Brooks Range and out west by the Kotzebue Sound area, we are expecting some MVFR and IFR conditions to persist further north up along the Arctic coastline as well. Down in the Panhandle area, we do have some MVFR conditions throughout Sunday morning. But as we move into Sunday afternoon, northern portions of the Panhandle expecting to clear out and have some VFR conditions, but we do have some MVFR conditions now approaching in the Yakutat area. Southern portions of mainland Alaska still going to be primarily VFR. Some areas along the west coast are going to see a mix of MVFR and IFR, and then MVFR conditions from the Kotzebue Sound area through the Brooks Range and along the Arctic coastline. Much of the central and eastern portions of the Bering Sea and Aleutian Islands still expecting to have IFR conditions, but again, as we move closer towards the western Aleutians, an area of VFR conditions is expected. Moving into Monday, continuing to see the VFR conditions for the western Aleutians, the remainder of the Bering Sea and Aleutian Islands expecting to see IFR conditions, with some of those MVFR and IFR conditions making it along the west coast, and then up along the Arctic coastline we will continue to see MVFR conditions. Through much of mainland Alaska, central and southern locations, expecting to see VFR conditions, and still going to have MVFR conditions for much of the Panhandle, with the exception of the areas further to the north where VFR conditions are expected. Moving into Monday afternoon, MVFR conditions throughout all of the Panhandle area, but much of the mainland portions of Alaska, southern and central especially, are still going to see VFR conditions. We will continue to have MVFR conditions along the Arctic coastline and then down some portions of the west coast to include the Bristol Bay area. A mix of MVFR and IFR conditions are expected for the Bering Sea and Aleutian Islands. For the passes, starting up north, AKwx Pass should be MVFR throughout the day on Sunday, as well as at Adigan Pass. With all the VFR that we saw through the southern mainland, especially around the south central area, expecting to see quite a bit of VFR conditions through the passes. Lake Clark and Merrill will both be VFR for Sunday, as well as Rainy Pass, Windy Pass, Isabel Pass, and Mentasta Pass. As we move a little bit closer to the Anchorage area, we do have Tenita Pass and Portage Pass also being VFR throughout the day on Sunday. Then down in southeast, Chilkoot and White both going to start off marginal and improve to VFR conditions in the afternoon. For our freezing level, starts off riding north of the Panhandle area, then through south central Alaska, through southwest as well, and then exiting out central and northern portions of the Bering Sea. Our 2,000 foot line also extends over much of the Panhandle, south central and southwest, and another little area of warmer air approaching the Panhandle area with heights up to as high as 6,000 feet south of the Gulf. For our icing, staying in southeast, above 4,000 feet is expected. Up along the Arctic coastline from the Brooks Range north, we do have below 8,000 feet. And then down in an area of the Pribilof Islands to the central and eastern Aleutians, above 3,000 feet is expected. Taking a look at our jet stream, strongest core of the jet is going to be south of the Aleutian Islands, getting as high as 130 knots. Out over the islands themselves, a little bit weaker, still westerly at 60 knots. Out over the Panhandle area, stronger branch of the jet coming up as high as 85 knots over the island or over the area, and then as high as 110 knots as we exit out over Western Canada. Up along the Arctic coastline, another jet streak at 90 knots out of a westerly direction. Dropping down to 9,000 feet, staying up with the circulation around our Arctic low that is going to bring westerly flow of around 35 knots to northern portions of the coastline. Much of mainland Alaska under high pressure is not seeing very strong winds at 9,000 feet, but as we drop down near the Gulf, we have low pressure out over the Gulf, bringing some easterly winds to the northern Gulf, 25 to 35 knots, strongest as they get over Kodiak Island area, and then out of a southerly direction over the Panhandle at 45 knots. Out over the southern portions of the Bering and Aleutian Islands, starting in the central and eastern Aleutians, westerly winds 25 knots, and getting up to as high as 50 knots near the western Aleutians. For 3,000 feet, staying up by the western Aleutians, a little bit weaker here, westerly flow 35 knots. For the central and eastern Aleutians, northwesterly winds 25 knots. And again, along the North Gulf Coast with the two lows out over the Gulf, we do have easterly flow near Kodiak Island 40 knots, 35 knots by Cordova, and 45 knots out of a southerly direction for the Panhandle. Much of mainland Alaska still not seeing very strong winds, but as we get along the Arctic coastline, flow around our Arctic low is going to bring in westerly winds 25 knots. For turbulence by Kodiak Island, we have below 4,000 feet that is expected. And then for the majority of the Panhandle area from the central and southern locations, especially below 5,000 feet is expected.
Ahoy, Extra Cadets, and welcome to the Okeanos Explorer. I'm Debbie, and I'm an ocean explorer. I work for NOAA, which stands for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Together with many other people, I work on this ship, and we explore the deep sea. How do we do that? Let's go find out.
Octonauts, let's do this. Yow!
The pressure in the ocean is so great humans can't go there, so we send a special robot. Octocadets, meet Deep Discoverer, our special robot for ocean exploration. And this is Chris. He works with Deep Discoverer. Hi, Chris.
Hey, Debbie.
Can you tell us about what Deep Discoverer does?
Sure. So this is Deep Discoverer, and today we're going to take Deep Discoverer up to 4 miles down to the ocean floor so you can see what Deep Discoverer sees.
And how do we do that?
We do that by using these powerful cameras and powerful lights.
That's neat. And what is that?
And this is our manipulator arm, and we use this arm to take biological and geological samples that we store up front in these boxes, and so that we can bring them to the surface so scientists can analyze them.
Wow, isn't that cool, Octocadets? Wow! Now that we know more about the special robot that explores the seafloor, let's find out more about the ship. Octocadets, let's do this. Now let's find out what we do with D2's video. Come along. This is the control room. A lot of things about D2 happen in here. Behind me you see the pilots. They steer D2 on the seafloor. And over here we have scientists. Hi, Steve and Stacy.
Hi, this is Steve and I'm Stacy and we are marine biologists.
Can you tell us about the work you do here?
We actually look at the videos collected by the robots and we try to identify organisms along with other scientists on the shore.
What are you looking at right now?
We're actually looking at a sea star.
That's so awesome, thank you. Now let's look at how we make maps of the seafloor.
Excellent, Quasi. A good map helps you to get to places you've never been.
We also have a scientist on board who makes maps of the seafloor. Hi, Derek.
Hi, Debbie.
Can you tell us about your work?
Sure. My job on the ship is to make maps of the ocean floor. We do this by sending sound from the bottom of the ship. It echoes off the seafloor and comes back to the ship. And then from that, we can make maps like this. So this is what it would look like if you were able to drain the water out of the ocean and actually see what the landscape looked like down there. We use these maps to give the vehicles a place to dive, and they explore further, just like octonauts do.
Status report, Dashie.
We're right on course, Captain.
So earlier we learned that D2 picks things up from the seafloor with his manipulator arm. Let's find out what we do with those samples. This is the wet lab, and Megan spends a lot of time here. Megan, can you tell us about your work?
I am the sample data manager, so when the ROV comes up, we go out and we collect the samples from the ROV and we bring them in here. And we try to record as much information about them as possible, everything from the details about what they look like to the environment conditions where they were found. How cold was it, for example? Then we come in and we take imagery using this microscope, and we take pictures using this camera as well. And then after we get all the pictures taken and we're ready, we prepare them for shipping to other scientists and museums so more science can be done, such as the squat lobster, this cup coral as well.
And what is that?
This is a piece of coral, or several pieces of coral, that we think might actually be a new species. So we are going to send it out for a comparison to existing species to see if we discovered something new.
Wow, you have a really cool job.
Thank you.
Fascinating. I've read about this, but I've never actually seen it.
An important part of how we explore the ocean is keeping in touch with scientists and octocadets on shore. Let's go see how we do that. Rosemary, could you tell the octocadets a little about what that dish does?
Sure. My name is Lieutenant Rosemary Abbott. I'm the operations officer aboard the Okeanos Explorer, and that is our VSAT. It stands for Very Small Aperture Terminal, and inside that satellite dome is a very powerful dish antenna that allows us to communicate with shore and share video in real time. The technology is called telepresence.
Wow, that is so interesting. Thank you, Rosemary. Now I'm getting really hungry. Let's go to the kitchen and talk about food. This is the ship's kitchen, also known as the galley. And this is Michael. Hi, Michael.
Hi, Debbie.
Michael is the chief steward on this ship, and he keeps 49 people fed for 3 weeks at a time. Michael, how do you do that?
With a lot of care and with the help of 3 crew members. I have myself, the chief steward, a chief cook, and a second cook. And we just do it with a lot of love and care and make sure that everybody's happy and well fed. We use up to 150 dozen eggs per trip, up to 100 gallons of milk, a lot of veggies and fruits, a lot of snacks. Everybody's very pleased with what we usually put out. We also make sure that we do it in a loving way, in a sanitary way, in a safe way that keeps everybody from getting any tummy aches.
I'm about to enter the ship's bridge. It's like the Octopod's headquarters.
Octonauts to the HQ!
Ahoy, Captain!
Ahoy, Debbie.
Hi, Eric.
Hello.
Octocadets, meet Eric Johnson, the commander of the ship. Eric, can you tell us about what you do up here?
Absolutely. Hello, Octocadets. My name's Eric Johnson. I'm an Corps officer, and I'm the captain of the Okeanos Explorer. Welcome to my office. This is where we drive the ship. This is where we control the operations. We run the propellers that are underneath us in the back to the wheel up here at the front, which is where we steer. It's a pretty cool job. It's very exciting, and it's pretty beautiful around here as well.
So, Octocadets, now you know a little bit about the ship and how we explore the deep sea. I hope you enjoyed our time together. I'll see you next time.
Debbie, safety first.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back for the Marines. We'll start off with a look at our ice edge. We do still have some strips of ice breaking off of the main ice edge with that kind of easterly wind that we're seeing out around the Nunavik Island area. We also have plenty of polynyas forming and expanding all along the west coast up into the Kotzebue Sound area. And we do have melting continuing in the Bristol Bay area. So be mindful of all those things, especially along the shore-fast ice where those polynyas are continuing to grow. As we look down in southeast Alaska on the inside waters, northerly winds 15 knots until we get down to the southern inside waters where we do have southeasterly winds at 25 knots with seas up to as high as 12 feet. Out over the Gulf, starting in the southern location, southeast 40 knots with seas up to 16 feet, becoming more easterly and diminishing as we get further to the north down to 25 knots as we get closer towards Yakutat. Then on Monday, all southerly winds in the inside waters 15 to 20 knots. Out over the Gulf, southerly winds 25 knots there, diminishing as we get further to the north again, 15 to 20 knots out of the southeast. Seas up to as high as 19 feet in the southern portions of the Gulf. For Sunday, looking out over the Gulf, we have east to northeast winds 20 to 25 knots. In the Prince William Sound area, northeast winds 10 knots there. Cook Inlet area 10 to 15 knots also out of the northeast. That's going to be true down in Kamishak Bay as well. And for Monday, staying in the Cook Inlet area, northeast winds 10 knots. West of the Barren Islands, northwesterly wind 10 knots, and that's going to be getting up to as high as 15 knots on the east side of the Barren Islands. And then somewhat variable winds 10 to 15 knots as we get into the northern areas of the Gulf and into Prince William Sound. For the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island area, starting off by Kodiak Island, northeasterly winds 15 to 25 knots, strongest on the east and southern sides of the island. Then as we get to the southern portions of the peninsula, northwesterly winds 20 knots, and then in the Bering side, north to northeast winds around 10 knots. For Monday, flow becoming much more westerly or northwesterly, 10 to 15 knots in all locations with seas as high as 8 feet to the east of Kodiak Island. Sunday out by the Aleutians, starting off in the eastern Aleutians, northwesterly winds 10 knots, strengthening as we get further off to the west, staying out of a west to northwest direction, up to as high as 25 knots south of the central Aleutians, and then west to southwest flow 15 to 20 knots as we get by the western Aleutian Islands, seas up to as high as 9 feet, highest by the western Aleutians. Then on Monday, flow for the central and eastern Aleutian Islands out of a northwesterly direction, 15 to 20 knots at most locations. On the Pacific side of the central Aleutians, a little bit stronger there, small craft level at 25 knots. As we get by the western Aleutians, becoming southerly at 25 knots. On the west coast of the state, All winds are out of the north, 15 to 20 knots, and then a little bit weaker at the Pribilof Islands, down to 10 knots there. For Monday, continuing the northerly winds, 15 to 20 knots at all locations, seas as high as 4 feet for St. Matthew Island and the Pribilof Islands. Up along the Arctic coastline, westerly winds, 25 knots are expected, becoming northerly as we move down the west coast, around 20 knots there. And then on Monday, staying out of the east along the Arctic coastline, 15 to 25 knots, strongest as we get by the Beaufort Sea, and then becoming west to eventually north as we move down the west coast of the state, 10 to 15 knots. For our weather for the remainder of the night, we have our low pressure system and front moving into the Gulf of Alaska, bringing some lighter rain to Kodiak Island, but the heavier rain and stronger winds are going to start to push in throughout the night for the southern parts of the Panhandle, with some lighter rain as we move into more northern locations in the Panhandle. Much of mainland Alaska should stay with clearer skies until we get up along the Arctic coastline, where a trough is pushing through, bringing some snow to the area, eventually bringing some winds that will lead to a winter weather advisory for blowing snow and a blizzard warning by the Kaktovik area. Those will impact or begin Sunday afternoon and then go into Monday morning. Down in the Aleutian Islands, some light rain showers for the central and eastern Aleutians, with some rain by the western Aleutians as well, with a low moving through the area. Then on Sunday, lows out over the southern portions of the Bering, continuing to bring light rain to the Aleutian Islands. Much of mainland Alaska is going to remain under fair weather till we get up again along the Arctic coastline, where we do have that snow, and especially blowing snow for the eastern portions of the Arctic coast. Our low pressure in the southeastern portions of the Gulf continuing to bring rain for the Panhandle area, with the heaviest rain in the southern locations, and also seeing those stronger winds. Then on Monday, continuing to see more rain for the Panhandle area and strong winds for southern locations. Much of mainland Alaska is still going to be in fair weather, and the Arctic coastline, another front moving through, bringing more snow to the area, with isolated rain showers down in the Bering and eastern Aleutians, and then a new front coming in for the western Aleutian Islands, bringing more rain to the area. With Alaska Weather, I'm David Kramer. Thanks for being with us.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.